This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and does not provide medical or legal advice. Please consult with a qualified professional before making any decisions regarding your health or legal situation.
On the subject of marijuana in particular. That is the purpose of this meeting, ladies and gentlemen, to lay the foundation for a nationwide campaign by you to demand by law such compulsory education.
High in the Ozark Mountains, it's the Greene County Podcast with Mike and Mason.
Okay. Greene County Podcast, Mike and Mason, we're back. We're not doing a road trip today.
No.
But, since
back in studio.
I think we'll be doing that one in the next week or two, right? We can. Next
I would love to, man. I had a blast on that.
Every other one, maybe every other one. Maybe one bi-quarterly field trip. Either way, this is Greene County Podcast, and Mason came in with a really good topic that I think we can definitely burn 15 to 30 minutes on, and that
easily, dude. Probably 2 hours if we really got into it.
Your sad bastard grow stories.
Yeah, what went wrong?
Sad bastards.
What went wrong? You ever have that thing? I know you have. We've talked about it multiple times, but like every stage, you can completely screw up your grow.
Yep.
And we want to help you identify those things and maybe give you little tips on how to avoid it.
We'll do that. We'll break this up into 4 parts.
So
the first discussion, we could talk about seeds and like how that and the germination and the fails and the pops.
And then I think we should do watering and newts and toxics
during our vegetative state.
Yep.
And then our third segment will be flowering and curing
and pests and diseases, dude.
But that's
it's all
state.
And
then that's 2-4 because you could do a vegetative state and you could do
just the grow section,
the moldy flower one. Whatever.
And then
and then the fourth, our conclusion. So that's
harvest time, man.
So in the seed world, that was kind of the first thing that was kind of tough for us growers in Missouri to figure out where to get them. Luckily, I had an old timer dude was like, "This is your guy," but then he was getting them from like overseas, and that was like the really good genetics because I used some of his and they were good genetics.
Yeah. But
the ones that were like you're talking like almost $20 to $30 per seed, and like spending $120 per 5-pack or something.
That's an investment, dude.
You
don't want to mess it up. You don't want to mess it up.
Especially when you can get other seeds in the States that are considerably cheaper and the genetics are good. Now, granted, I did go down the road and went to a dispensary in, was it Cassville?
Yeah. The Cassville seed store thing.
Those weren't that great. And then I've since gotten some from a grow store. Those weren't that great. But I go with Captain Redbeard because consistently that guy does not. Every time it is what it is, it says it is, they almost always pop and they almost always sprout up.
Yeah, if they're not showing up to your house discreetly in a DVD case,
that's what I'm talking about, man.
I mean, think about where you're going.
I love it, dude.
But if you're spending like, especially on the high-end genetics, like 20, 30 a seed, you don't want to waste it. And I think one of the biggest mistakes somebody makes in like the seeding, germinating thing is they don't germinate properly. They don't. I like to put mine in like a wet paper towel and just leave it in my cabinet in the dark for a little bit.
So because I do pretty much the same thing. And
humidity is important.
Yeah. That will throughout the entire process.
Oh yeah.
But with the seeds, I pretty much do the same thing. Paper plates. Each one is in a folded up paper towel, soaked, and then together. And they sit up kind of behind my utility sink and they just wait. And almost always within a day, maybe 2, they're popping. I'm watering them at least once or twice. I just keep going back there and checking to make sure the towel's wet.
Yep.
You don't want it to dry out.
Humidity is like the biggest thing in this stage, like germination, or even if you're cloning, and also, you want to make sure you cover those things and keep that humidity in because they don't have the roots to suck enough in yet for them.
Something else, you got to be sanitary.
Oh yeah,
when you're messing with those seeds and stuff, and the water you get spraying, all that stuff. Just make sure you're just trying to stay clean as possible. Because again, they're very small, and when they sprout up, that little tiny root thing is like literally the basis of what a 3 to 4 foot plant's going to be. So it's very small, and it doesn't have a lot of energy in the beginning. It's literally got enough energy to push that out.
Bust out,
and then it literally. I almost always have more problem not with the sprout, but that period between sprout and shooting up. Sometimes you can tell where it'll shoot up and like the the seed cap is still on top of it, but it didn't get high enough and it just ran out of gas.
Yeah.
Not because I did anything wrong. Literally I put 6 out and one of them does that.
Yeah, sometimes it just happens.
It's just the way it is. But it also is a good litmus test too to what you need to keep, because sometimes I typically personally will plant more than I keep just to see how they're going.
Strongest survive.
Yeah, or the way I torture them. If those ones that do survive, usually those are ones that yield the most.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, when you stun them like that. But
what you don't want to do when you got seeds, honestly, is just plant them directly into the pot.
No.
It can work, but don't. It's kind of a waste.
Do you use root starters? The sponges?
Well, when I do cloning, I definitely use some mycorrhizal or whatever it's called. It's a rooting hormone.
Yeah.
And I definitely mix that in with right around, and then I literally dip my stems in it and then put a little in the hole and fill it up.
So you don't do when seeds, you do root
with
starters?
Seeds, I don't. I probably should though, but I just.
Oh my God, they're a lifesaver.
I bet I don't have a problem with rooting
consistently. They're just, and it makes it so much easier too when the transfer. So I used to pot up.
Yeah,
which is dumb as hell. Because I mean, you're talking about the difference between putting in a 3 gal versus
and a
5 gal.
Yeah.
So you go from the initial into a 3, and then you're like, oh my God, it's getting bigger, and you got to put it in a 5.
Yeah.
That sucks.
Just put it in the 5.
From a 3 gal to a 5 gal with a root system in it, and trying not to kill it and flipping it without getting dirt everywhere and all that stuff. That sucks. Don't do that.
I don't have to worry about that because the way I grow mine, I almost intentionally overroot mine over time in my grow tent. I don't like to. I stunt them on purpose because I only have so much room. So that's actually part of my process. So I don't want a heavy root system at the beginning. I have plenty of time for that to mature when I'm growing.
Yeah, I straight go 5s now, right into the 5, and that's their final resting
You might
place.
as well. There's no it's like you said, the roots. It's too dangerous. You're gonna hurt your plant more and lower the yield than if you would just plant in a 5 from the beginning.
I wish, again, this is another great topic, but I wish we could grow outside so I could have 2 at the same time.
Well, I mean, if you lock everything up and it's not within line, you got a privacy fence. I think it's.
I want a free 7-footer, 8-footer out there. Just look outside. I want that one and just let it go with the time. I have an outdoor grow and indoor grow.
You know, I don't condone this, but I do know there's quite a few, especially older people that are like, I don't care. I moved from California and I brought this bad boy with me. And I'm like, this is kind of insane.
And they didn't know what they were doing.
On the back of their patio in Nixa or something. Like, that's crazy.
Male plants in there, bro. That's not a good call. That's bad times. But again, that's why we're here, to inform. Now, not a lot can go wrong other than just killing it straight out in the beginning, but a lot can go wrong in the vegetative state. And that's what we'll talk next. Dark Side of the Stream on 104.
Dark Side of the Stream on 104.
Wow.
Bro, you trying to plug your other thing during our episode? I'm leaving it in. All mistakes and all. We are transparent and dirty here on the Green County Podcast.
All right, back in it. It's Green County Podcast.
Yep.
And now we're going to talk about the vegetative state.
Yeah, we're talking about everything that can go wrong.
My first grow that I had was I pretty much learned so many things in that first grow because of all the mistakes I made. Because I never really grown anything inside of a tent before. The watering schedule is different. Your approach is different. I had someone to help me, thank God. But I probably called them every day with like, oh my God, what is this doing? Why are they doing this? I can literally now, after years, walk in that tent and look at them and see where the plant leaves are, what color they are, where they're facing, how they're doing it. And then I can tell you mainly like, okay, you're overwatering it, you're underwatering it, it's the lack of nitrogen.
Yeah,
you
nutrient deficiencies,
you're
show
burning
up.
Those leaves, or so many different things now because of all the problems that I've had through the vegetative state then figure out what it is and then, get a solution. But early on, my biggest problem that I had was figuring out the watering. Because I was definitely overwatering them. You know what I mean? You're like,
you don't want them to die. You're like, plant seed water.
I go down there, I need to water them again. But then you're like, okay, you really to really do it right. And that, again, this changes because if you're using soil as your medium, it's one thing. If you're using cocoa as your medium, it's another. If you're doing full hydro, completely thing
those
all
nutrient
together.
film techniques
There's water
are very
in there all the
very,
time, and it's complete. It's always running. Cocoa, you water them a lot more because they don't really. There's nothing to keep. There's no
a lot
soil.
of drainage.
It goes through it really quickly, and you almost kind of have to create your own like solution for it, if you will. Like not to say that you don't do that with soil, but soil is a lot less forgiving because there's already so much stuff inside that soil, nutrients, nitrogen, all the stuff that the plant's going to need anyway.
Yeah, so it's easier
I
than
like
soil.
soil as kind of a backup. Like if I screw up, if I didn't do something at the right time or whatever, it always has my back. Cocoa is great. It's a great medium. Don't get me wrong, but
I like blending them. That way you get the best of both worlds.
that's not a bad idea either.
Right?
But yeah, overwatering was probably my biggest thing that went wrong.
Yeah, you don't. So when you water, like Mike said, you feel like you want to keep watering it. Since I grow either in a soil or a cocoa soil medium, I tend to drench those bad boys, like soak it. Maybe because they've got like a little reservoir on the bottom, so I'll even have a little bit of standing water at the bottom, and then I'll leave it for like 3 days, easy, 3 to 5 days, depending how humid it is in my grow area, and I let the soil dry. You want to let the soil dry too, because a lot of people don't know roots, they kind of need oxygen. And letting them dry is one way to just kind of constantly have that flux. Also, if you're using like a percolator, like a bubbler in whether you're doing hydroponic or even soil, I've got my water on a constant feed whenever, smart home style. Press a button and it'll feed it. But I also every now and then turn on a air diffuser in the thing
To put air through it.
Yeah, since that water reservoir is just sitting there for like a week or two, I want to make sure that it's like some fresh. it's like a goldfish. You can't just leave it in the
Can't
bag.
just put it in the thing. It needs oxygen, even though it's in the water. There are so many different ways. Ultimately what I discovered is that you want to overwater less frequently.
Yes,
so
that is the best way to put
If
it.
it's a question of, did I give them enough? Don't worry about that. Give them a ton.
And then wait a while.
Wait. And I do the fingertip test, which is that first little crease in your fingertip.
Mm-hmm.
You push that down to the soil, and if you feel moisture up to that first little line in your finger, they're still good. If it's dry all the way down, then you can water it. That's usually the litmus test that I use that hasn't failed me yet.
Yeah, and that works. I've never really had a problem with this, but I know that a huge issue also with water is like the pH of the water, and or if you're using a nutrition mix. You want to make sure that it's not too heavy pH or too light. It also matters what kind of a growth medium you have. A lot of people have like just a fertilizer from Home Depot or something, or maybe they actually throw sphagnum moss, I think. Is that how you say it? A lot of fertilizers have a moss component in it that really messes with the acidity of your soil. So you might need to mess with the pH. That can honestly be the deciding factor between a nutrient deficiency and not. You could be giving it all the nutrients, but because of the pH of the mix, it's not able to uptake it. So pH, huge thing with water, I think.
Yeah, everyone says that.
Yeah.
It's lights. It's lights, and then what you feed it. We'll be back to talk about the flowering and what can go wrong with that next. Green County Podcast.
That's the name.
We're back, and you've done 4 to 6 months worth of work every day, every other day. You've trimmed, you've watered it, you've talked to it, you've babied it, you've dreamt about it. You're probably smelling it now, and it's time to flower that plant. Now, you're flowering. What can go wrong in this?
I have a thing I do before I move into my flowering tent, because I have separate tents for vegetative and flower. Check for pests. I'm okay with a little bit of stuff going on.
You have them?
So what I mostly do, because I don't have fancy soil. I just grab basically whatever.
Outside soil.
I don't do outside, but a lot of the stuff that you get at like some of the superstores and stuff, it's literally like slop that they've thrown into a bag from Mississippi and then brought it up here.
You're not getting Happy Frog or anything.
Yeah, it's not Happy
Okay.
Frog. It's not super clean. So every now and then I'll get like a gnat problem. Or one thing I had recently, a little bit of fungus growing on the top of the
There's a
soil
constant
and or
of
like
water.
a white powder, that mildewy thing, you know. I've had all of those, and because of the way I do my vegetation thing, sometimes I'll do a neem oil treatment. If you've ever used that, it's really good for all kinds of parasites and fungus and stuff like that. You can just mix some neem oil and some water, spray it on there. You can apply it to the soil and also the plant itself. It's not going to hurt anything. It's not going to mess anything up. It's super natural. I like to give it a once over for pests before I move stuff into the flower, because if I can keep my flower clean initially, it normally just stays that way.
Interesting. I personally have had a lot of luck in the flowering process. I don't have any pests. Like I was going to say,
Nice.
Outside brings inside problems. So it's like one of those things where I think I may spend a little bit too much money on certain materials, but I always know that I have no problems.
Mike's grow operation is pristine. It looks like a hospital.
It's worth the extra coin, but it's one of those things. So I've not had, luckily, knock on wood, any issues with gnats, problems with pests or anything during that part. I've got one of those sticky traps hanging in the tents, but always
those are
clean
super helpful.
For the most part. Never had any mold issues. I see it breaks my heart. And on the home grower sub or the Missouri Medical, I'm like, what is this, blood rot? And it looks gorgeous on the outside. And then he turns it and he opens it and it's just complete brown. And it's like, oh, dude, your whole plant is
horrible.
Done. Cut
Dang.
it off and you're probably screwed.
Right? I do know one problem you had during flowering that we talked about, which honestly wasn't too terrible of a thing. Foxtailing.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah. Okay, that's not a bad.
It's not terrible, but it definitely looks like something's going on.
Yeah, that's not a bad thing to bring up.
If you don't know,
because it's not like.
So if you don't know, foxtailing is a thing where sometimes it's genetic, sometimes it's like a heat or stress on the plant. Your plant starts the flower almost starts feathering out and creating spires. It looks. I don't want to say fluffy, but how would you describe it?
It basically goes, it's the easiest way to describe it is you put your plant into flower, and at some point during the flowering process, it gets messed up, whether any of the things you says, and it goes back into a vegetative thing. So then it starts to basically fill leaves into where those flowers are, because it doesn't really know. Like, I know guys that have gone almost a flower and then re-vegged it, you know what I mean? And trimmed and let it go back and then do it again. There are lots of things you can do. But foxtailing doesn't necessarily mean that it's done. You're your thing's done. It ultimately,
it's still usable.
Yeah, you can turn it into concentrate. You can cook it. You can do whatever. Smokable. It might get a little harsh because there's so much plant material in there, and the trim's going to be such a pain in the ass.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not like you're done. I had that happen just because I let them go too tall. And they were probably 4 inches away from that light. And I know they were, and none of them got burned. That was a crazy thing. They didn't burn. They just foxtailed on me. Yeah. But the yield on those things were just unbelievable. And it smelled incredible. But again,
I bet it made some excellent concentrate because it just.
What I did with it, honestly. I know I did. I think that's what I did. I think I just
edibles or something.
I moved it through my hand trimmer and then just shaked it out and cook with it. All right, so the last part of this is obviously what can go wrong with your cure. You made it all the way through. Everything's good. You chopped it. You hung it. And it's dry. It's breaking off on the twigs are breaking off. You feel like it's dry enough. You chop it down. You trim it up. Some people do wet trims. Some people do dry trims. Doesn't really matter. But at the end of the day, all that moisture goes, the idea that when you hang it, all that moisture drops into the buds. So that's where the remaining moisture of the plant goes into. You cut them off. And then once you do that, sometimes they can re-moisturize.
Yeah, well, they dry from the outside in. So it's still, even though it's crunchy on the outside, it's still wet on the inside. And that's kind of why you cure it too. You're pulling out that moisture throughout the entirety of the bud, which is why you want to make sure your moisture content is perfect when you put it into curing. What's your percentage, humidity? Do you have a specific one?
So what I do ultimately what saved my ass is turkey bags.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Typically,
They also call them turp bags, by the way.
I also typically hang it, cut them, depending on what the buds are. If I did a really good job and I know that they're full and they're good, I'll hand trim them. If I did okay and I've got a lot, but they're smaller, I usually put them through the hand one because they go by faster.
If I'm in trim prison, that's exactly what I do.
It depends on the quality of it, how much I put into it, and then I usually one or two ways. I used to tray them out. And then I put parchment paper down and I'd lay them on a parchment for overnight. Next day, bag them. And then I'd put the reader in there. And it usually was good. But I've had a mold on me. The last time I used jars was the mold, like a quarter pound, half a pound. That was that bad.
That's like the worst feeling. You've done everything right up to that point.
I learned a lot from it. And then again, that was immediately where I was like, I got to get turkey bags. And I did. And it's all good. My last grow that I just cut down a couple months ago, I trimmed them, hand put them in the bags, and then left the bags open all night, closed them up, good to go.
Nice.
So hopefully you've learned from our mistakes, but ultimately don't feel bad if you do make a mistake because we literally told you a mistake that we made at every single level throughout the grow process.
It's a learning process for sure, and it's different for each grow, for each strain.
What your mediums are, how you're growing them, where you're growing them, how big your tin is, all that stuff. And ultimately, you are the one that is going to benefit from those mistakes. So don't get discouraged. Understand that you can, if it dies now, you start tomorrow, and it's all good.
Yeah, just like those plants, you're growing too, okay?
As always, if you have tips, questions, or comments, hit us up, greencountypodcast@gmail.com. Like, share, follow, and use responsibly. Grow even better.
So that our children are obliged to learn the truth, because it is only through knowledge that we can safely protect them.
This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and does not provide medical or legal advice.